Obaci's mornings were always the same, a battle between exhaustion and determination. The sound of his mother's voice calling his name jolted him from his sleep. He stirred under the thin, patched blanket that barely kept the harmattan chill at bay. "Obaci, wake up! Go and collect Akira from Mama Chica before she finishes selling." Nena's voice was firm, but carried a tenderness only a mother could have. Obaci groaned and sat up slowly, his body sore from another late-night study session. Their small room was dimly lit by the weak glow of the rechargeable lamp on the table. His mother, dressed in a faded wrapper and blouse, stood near the stove, fanning the fire with an old cardboard piece. "Yes, Mama," he murmured, slipping his feet into his worn-out slippers. The soles were so thin he could feel every pebble on the road, but there was no money to replace them. "Here," she said, handing him a small aluminum bowl and some naira notes. "Hurry back. I'll make pap before you return so you won't be late for school." As he stepped outside, the chill of the early morning air hit him, and he shivered. The street was already bustling with activity. Vendors arranged their goods, children chased each other, and the occasional Danfo driver honked impatiently. Mama Chica's Akira stand was a makeshift wooden table under a big mango tree. The smell of sizzling bean cakes filled the air as customers queued, laughing and chatting. Obaci joined the line, his stomach rumbling. "Obaci," Mama Chica called when she saw him. "Your mother sent you, eh? Wait small, I'll pack yours." He nodded, grateful she always prioritized them despite their financial struggles. Moments later, he clutched the warm Akira and sprinted back home, the coins jingling in his pocket. By the time he returned, his mother had set the small wooden table, with 2 tin cups of steaming pap. She smiled as he entered, the weight of her struggles momentarily hidden behind her love for her son. "Eat quickly," she said, sitting beside him. As they ate, she spoke softly. "Obaci, you know your exams are coming. I will go to the market today, and try to sell more so we can raise the money. But you must do your part. Work hard in school, eh?" "I will, Mama," he promised. "I'll do my best." That's why he always read into the night. He was determined to pass his junior secondary certificate examination, JSC. But every effort came at the cost of sleep. After they ate, she prayed over him, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders. "God, please guide my son. Keep him safe, make him strong, and let him succeed." Obaci hugged her tightly, before slipping into his blue and white uniform. He glanced at her one last time, as she prepared her wares for the market. The walk to school was long and tiring, but Obaci had grown used to it. He passed familiar sights. Oga Shahid's vulcanizing shop, the old woman who sold roasted corn, and the group of boys kicking a deflated football on the dirt road. When he reached the school gate, dread filled him. He was late again. Bruno the Beast, the senior prefect, stood by the gate like a vengeful deity. His long cane swung lazily in his hand, a weapon that struck fear into every student. "Obaci," Bruno called, his deep voice cutting through the chatter of other students. "Why are you late again?" "Senior, I faced the wall." Obaci obeyed, his heart pounding. The first lash of the cane stung like fire, followed by another and another. Tears welled in his eyes, but he bit his lip to keep from crying out. The principal, Mr. Emeka, watched from his office window, shaking his head. "That boy," he muttered to a teacher. "He's smart, but his lateness will ruin him." By the time Obaci reached his classroom, his back was sore, and his pride was bruised. His classmates whispered as he walked past, but he ignored them. Instead, he focused on the chalkboard, determined to prove everyone wrong. Obaci sat at his desk, wincing as the pain from Bruno's earlier lashing throbbed across his back. The classroom was noisy, but he barely noticed the chatter of his classmates. Instead, his mind replayed the look on Bruno's face as he punished him for being late. Obaci clenched his fists under the desk. "I can't go through this again," he thought. His resolve hardened. Tomorrow, he would wake up early. No excuses, no delays. He would avoid Bruno's cane, and the humiliation that followed. For once, he wanted to walk into school without fear. The rest of the day dragged on, and as the final bell rang, Obaci packed his books, ready to leave. But just as the students began to file out, a sharp whistle cut through the air, followed by loud cheers. "Everyone to the field," a senior shouted. Our school team is playing government college. Excitement rippled through the students. The rivalry between their school, Bright Future Academy, and government college for troublesome boys was legendary. The two schools shared a history of animosity, and every match was a battle for pride. Obaci followed the crowd reluctantly, though he didn't care much for football. He found a spot at the back of the field where he could watch unnoticed. The match was intense, with students on both sides screaming encouragement and insults. Bright Future Academy's team scored, and the crowd erupted. Their victory chants filled the air, mocking the opposing team. On the other side of the field, the government college supporters bristled with anger. Then it happened. A junior student from Bright Future, perhaps caught up in the excitement, wandered too close to the rival group. One of their bullies, a tall, muscular boy, stepped forward and slapped him hard across the face. The boy fell to the ground, clutching his cheek and crying. The Bright Future students froze, their laughter dying in their throats. The bully stood over the boy smirking, daring anyone to intervene. For a moment no one moved. Then Bruno stepped forward. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the silence. "You don't touch one of ours. Apologize to him." The government college prefect, a burly boy named Timmy, sneered. "Apologize? Are you mad? He shouldn't have come near us." Bruno squared his shoulders, his eyes blazing. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you. Say sorry and leave him alone." Timmy laughed, gesturing to his group of friends. "What will you do if we don't? Fight us? You're outnumbered." The tension in the air was suffocating. Bruno's jaw tightened, but he didn't back down. "If you're looking for a fight, you've got one. But you'll regret it." It was all the encouragement Bright Future students needed. Fueled by Bruno's courage, they surged forward, shouting and throwing punches. The field erupted into chaos. Stones flew, fists collided, and screams filled the air. Obaci watched from a distance, his heart pounding. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The usually timid students of his school had rallied behind Bruno, pushing the government college boys back. The fight spilled into the parking lot, where buses were smashed and windows shattered. By the time it was over, Bright Future had driven their rivals off the premises. But the victory came at a cost. Several students were injured, and the school grounds were in disarray. As the students were dismissed for the day, the atmosphere was heavy with the aftermath of the fight. Obaci walked home, his thoughts racing. He couldn't shake the image of Bruno standing up to the bullies. For the first time, Obaci felt a flicker of admiration for the senior prefect. When he reached Oga Shahid's vulcanizing shop, he pushed the fight from his mind and focused on helping. Shahid, a jolly man in his 40s, welcomed him with a grin. "Obaci, you're late today. Trouble in school again?" "No, sir," Obaci lied, grabbing a tire. He worked until dusk, earning a few naira to add to his savings. As he walked home, exhaustion pulled at his limbs, but there was a sense of satisfaction in knowing he had done his part to help his mother. That night, he ate quickly, read for an hour, and fell asleep earlier than usual. Tomorrow, he promised himself, would be different. The sound of a cock crowing woke Obaci before dawn. He sat up, blinking in the dim light. His mother was still asleep, her body curled under the thin blanket. For a moment, he considered lying back down, but then he remembered his resolve. He dressed quietly, careful not to wake her. As he slipped his feet into his worn slippers, she stirred, her eyes half open. "Obaci, I'm going to school, Mama," he said softly. She squinted at him, surprised. "This early? Why? I want to get there on time," he replied. Nena smiled faintly, though she was too tired to ask further questions. "God bless you, my son," she murmured, closing her eyes again. Obaci stepped outside, the early morning air cool and refreshing. The streets were quiet, and for once, he enjoyed the solitude of his walk to school. When he reached the school gate, the compound was almost empty. Only a few students had arrived, and the classrooms were still locked. For the first time, Obaci felt a sense of pride. Bruno stood by the gate, his hands on his hips. His usual stern expression softened when he saw Obaci. "Ah, the perpetual latecomer," Bruno said, raising an eyebrow. "What's the occasion?" Obaci grinned shyly. "I just wanted to come early today, senior." Bruno nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Good. Keep it up." For a brief moment, They stood in companionable silence. Obaci had never seen this side of Bruno before. A side that wasn't just a disciplinarian, but also a leader who cared about the school. Go on to your class, Bruno said finally. And don't let me see you late again. Yes, senior, Obaci replied, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Obaci had just settled at his desk when loud chants interrupted the morning peace. Peering out the window, he saw them. Students from government college climbing over the fence, their faces filled with rage. We'll finish them today, they shouted. Fear gripped Obaci as chaos erupted once more. Obaci froze, his heart hammering as he saw the rival students flooding into the school compound. It was as though a dark wave of fury had descended, their shouts growing louder with each passing second. They're here for revenge, he thought, his throat dry. He could see them carrying sticks, bottles, and even stones. A group of bright future students who had arrived early ran for cover, their panicked screams echoing through the compound. From his vantage point in the classroom, Obaci saw Bruno near the gate, desperately trying to lock it. But the attackers were already inside, jumping over the fence like a swarm of angry locusts. Bruno shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Stay back. This is our school. His defiance was met with jeers. Bruno the Beast in? We'll show you who the real beast is today, one of the attackers yelled. Bruno squared his shoulders, his fists clenched. But even he couldn't fight off so many. The rival students swarmed toward him, some throwing stones. Bruno dodged one but was hit by another, staggering backward. Obaci felt a pang of fear for Bruno. The senior who had punished him so harshly now seemed like the only hope of defending their school. Obaci ducked behind his desk, trembling. He knew he should run, find somewhere to hide until the chaos ended. But as he peeked through the window again, he saw something that made his stomach churn. A group of the attackers dragging a bright future junior boy toward the gate. The boy cried and begged, but they didn't stop. Without thinking, Obaci sprang to his feet. He ran out of the classroom and toward the gate, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. He ran behind the principal's office and hid under a flower. But then he heard Bruno scream, and he tried to peek. Just then, someone grabbed him by the collar. Stupid junior, someone shouted. Before Obaci could react, a kick landed squarely on his back, sending him sprawling to the ground. Hands grabbed him roughly, dragging him toward the center of the compound where a crowd had gathered. When they stopped, he found himself face to face with Bruno. The senior prefect was on the ground, bleeding from a cut above his eye. His uniform was torn, and he was breathing heavily. Look at them, one of the rival seniors sneered, gesturing to Obaci and Bruno. Your beast and this little rat. We'll finish you both today. Obaci's fear turned to despair. He glanced at Bruno, who met his gaze with a mixture of anger and resignation. As the rival students closed in, ready to deliver their final blows, a sound pierced the air. Woo woo woo. It was the police siren. The attackers froze, their heads whipping toward the gate. Police! Run! Someone shouted. The compound erupted into chaos, as the students from government college scattered in every direction. Some tried to jump the fence again, while others bolted toward the nearest exit. Obaci felt a wave of relief wash over him. But before he could process what was happening, his vision blurred, and the world went black. When Obaci opened his eyes, he was lying in a hospital bed. The room was dimly lit, with the faint hum of a ceiling fan in the background. His head throbbed, and his body ached all over. He turned his head slowly, and saw his mother standing near the door, arguing with a police officer. Officer, my son is not a gang member. Nena's voice was shrill, filled with desperation. Madam, that's not what it looks like, the officer replied coldly. We caught him and others red-handed during the fight. The boys we questioned said they were all part of a gang. Obaci blinked, trying to make sense of their words. Gang member? Nena turned to him, her face wet with tears. Obaci, tell them the truth. You're not a gang member, are you? Mama, no. I swear. Obaci's voice cracked as he tried to sit up. The officer shook his head. We'll see. He's coming to the station for questioning once the doctor clears him. Hours later, Obaci found himself sitting in a cramped room at the local police station. His mother sat beside him, clutching his hand tightly. Across from them were two officers, their expressions stern. The principal of Bright Future Academy was also there, his face a mixture of disappointment and frustration. Obaci, one of the officers began. The other boys we caught said you were part of the group that attacked government college students last week. Is that true? No, sir, Obaci exclaimed. I wasn't part of anything. I was just in school when they came. The principal sighed. Obaci, you're already a problem child. Always late. But all of a sudden you came to school early that day. Why should we believe you? Obaci's chest tightened. Sir, I'm telling the truth. The officer leaned forward. If you didn't do anything, then why were you there when we arrived? Why did the other boys say you're one of them? I don't know, Obaci cried, tears streaming down his face. Nena sobbed quietly, her shoulders shaking. Please, my son is innocent. He would never join a gang. He's a good boy. The officers exchanged skeptical glances. The interrogation dragged on, with the officers pressuring Obaci to confess. Bruno is the son of our police chief. We would deal with this boy if he doesn't confess. Finally, they told Nena that she could bail him out. But the fee was exorbitant. I don't have that kind of money, she whispered, her voice breaking. Then he'll stay here until we sort this out, the officer said coldly. Nena looked at Obaci, then reached into her bag. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a bundle of cash. The money she had saved for his junior exam fees. Take it, she said, her voice barely audible. Just let my son go. Obaci stared at her in horror. Mama, no. That's for my exams. Hush, my son, she said, cupping his face. We'll find another way. God will provide. When they finally left the station, Obaci couldn't bring himself to look at his mother. He felt like a failure, a burden. As they reached their small home, Nena suddenly slapped him. Tell me the truth now, she screamed, her face streaked with tears. Did you do it? Are you in a gang? Obaci broke down, crying harder than he ever had. Mama, I didn't do it. I swear on my life. I just wanted to go to school early. I wanted to be better. Nena's anger dissolved into sorrow. She pulled him into her arms, both of them sobbing. That night, she knelt by his bed and prayed, her voice shaking with emotion. Lord, please reveal the truth. If my son is innocent, let it come to light. Protect him from this wickedness. Obaci listened, his heart heavy. Life had been so cruel to him. He cried too, doubting if justice would ever be on his side. The next morning, Obaci and his mother woke up to the sound of her mobile phone ringing. Nena, still weary from the previous day's ordeal, pulled herself out of bed and picked up the call. Obaci watched her facial expressions, his stomach twisting with anxiety. Madam, you need to come to the station. The voice was calm but firm. Nena's heart dropped. What now? She asked, her voice trembling. Haven't we been through enough? The officer sighed. We've received new information, and we need you and your son to come immediately. Obaci stepped forward hesitantly, his hands clammy. He felt his mother's protective hand on his shoulder as they walked out together. The police station felt colder than before. The same officer who had interrogated Obaci the previous day sat at the metal table, a thick file in front of him. To Obaci's surprise, the principal of his school was also present, his face grave. What's happening? Nena demanded, her voice tight with frustration. The officer motioned for them to sit. Please calm down. There's been a development. Obaci and his mother sat down, and the officer leaned forward, clasping his hands together. Bruno woke up, he began. Obaci's heart skipped a beat. He glanced at his mother, who looked equally startled. Bruno? Nena asked. Yes, the officer confirmed. He's awake, and he's spoken to us about what happened yesterday. The room fell silent. Obaci felt his chest tighten as he waited for the officer to continue. According to Bruno, the officer said, he saw Obaci during the attack, but he confirmed that your son wasn't part of the fight. In fact, he mentioned that Obaci was hiding when the other school students dragged him out. Relief washed over Nena's face. I told you, she exclaimed, her voice rising. I told you my son is innocent. The officer held up a hand to silence her. Madam, I understand your relief, but we had to follow protocol. Given the chaos of the situation, it was difficult to determine who was involved and who wasn't. The principal, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. Obaci, I owe you an apology, he said, his tone heavy with regret. I should have believed you. I should have defended you. But I failed you. Obaci didn't know what to say. Part of him felt vindicated, but another part still felt the sting of betrayal from someone he looked up to. Thank you, was all he could manage. As the conversation continued, the door to the room opened, and a tall, imposing man in a police chief's uniform entered. His presence immediately commanded attention, and everyone in the room stood up. Chief Akand, the officer said, saluting. Chief Akand nodded and walked in, his gaze sweeping across the room before settling on Obaci and his mother. For a moment his face froze, his expression unreadable. Nena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Akand, she whispered, her voice trembling. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the chief, who stared back at Nena with a mix of shock and recognition. Nena, he said, his voice barely audible. Obaci looked between them, confusion etched on his face. Mama? Who is he? Nena didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on Chief Akand, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. Chief Akand took a step forward, his gaze shifting to Obaci. For a moment, something softened in his expression. Is this your son? He asked, his voice low. Nena hesitated before nodding slowly. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Chief Akand's eyes lingered on Obaci, his lips parting as if to speak, but then he hesitated. Instead, he turned to the officer, his voice suddenly sharp and commanding. Release the boy immediately, he said, his gaze hardening. The officer saluted quickly. Yes, sir. Obaci stood frozen, glancing at his mother, who seemed equally stunned. Chief Akand's eyes flicked back to Nena, his voice softening. We need to talk, he said, his words heavy with meaning. Before Nena could respond, Obaci blurted. Mama, who is he? Why does he know you? Nena opened her mouth, but no words came out. Chief Akand looked at her, waiting. Finally she whispered, It's complicated. Obaci's heart raced as the silence stretched between them. Complicated? What did that mean? As if sensing the weight of the moment, Chief Akand turned to the officer. Make sure they get home safely. I'll handle the rest. And with that he walked out, leaving Obaci staring after him, 1,000 questions swirling in his mind. Who was Chief Akand? And why did his mother look like she'd just seen a ghost?